Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at some pretty fascinating research on a new treatment for triple-negative breast cancer. We're diving deep into an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, the one
Yeah.
that's kind of considered like,
The gold standard.
yeah, the gold standard for medical research. And this isn't just, deciphering medical jargon. This is about stuff that could really, change people's lives.
Absolutely. This research has the potential to totally change how we approach treating this really aggressive type of breast cancer.
Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, can you just kind of remind us, what makes triple-negative breast cancer so difficult to treat in the first place?
Sure. So triple negative breast cancer, it's known for its rapid growth. It tends to spread really quickly. And unlike other types of breast cancer, it doesn't respond to hormonal therapies or those targeted treatments. So that leaves us with fewer options. And even after treatment, the risk of it coming back is unfortunately higher.
Yeah, that's what makes this new research so important. So tell me more about the study. It's called KEYNOTE-522?
Yeah, that's right. KEYNOTE-522, it was a large study over 1,000 patients, and they wanted to see if adding an immunotherapy drug called pembrolizumab, you might know it as Keytruda, to the standard chemotherapy regimen, if that could improve outcomes for patients with early-stage triple-negative breast cancer.
So basically testing if this combo could be like a 1-2 punch against this, really tough opponent. What did they find out?
Well, the results were incredible. They found a really significant increase in what's called pathological complete response, or PCR, in the group that received both the pembrolizumab and the chemo.
Wait, hold on. Back up for a sec. What exactly does pathological complete response mean?
Basically, it means that after the treatment, there is no detectable invasive cancer in the breast tissue or the lymph nodes.
Oh, wow.
So think of it as like hitting the reset button on the disease, and you know what that means?
Yeah.
A much better chance of survival long term.
That's amazing. So how much of a difference did this pembrolizumab actually make?
Well, the PCR rate jumped from 51.2% with the standard chemo alone to 64.8% in the group that got the combination.
Wow.
That's a 13.6% increase. That's not something to just brush aside.
That's huge. Did they see this improvement across the board, or were there specific groups of patients who benefited more?
What's interesting is that these results were consistent across different subgroups, even in patients with low levels of something called PDL1 expression.
Okay, before you go any further, just remind me quickly what PDL1 is all about.
Right. So PDL1, think of it like a shield that some cancer cells use to hide from the immune system.
Okay.
Immunotherapy drugs like pembrolizumab help break down those shields. But in this study, even those patients whose tumors weren't using that shield still saw a benefit from this combination.
So that's really promising, right? Because it means that this treatment could potentially work for more people. So did the study look at anything beyond just these PCR rates? What about longer-term things like, recurrence or survival?
Well, the study hasn't been going on long enough to give us really definitive answers about overall survival. But the early data on something called event-free survival is very encouraging.
Event-free survival. What exactly does that include?
Yeah, so it's a broader measure. It looks not just at the PCR, but also at whether the cancer comes back, whether it spreads to other parts of the body, or unfortunately, if the patient dies from any cause.
So it's kind of like the big picture of, how well the treatment keeps the cancer under control over time. And what did they find?
They found that those patients who got the pembrolizumab along with the chemo, they had a lower risk of any of those events happening compared to those who just got chemo alone.
Okay, so while they need to, follow these patients for a longer time to really confirm the early signs are looking really good.
Yeah, definitely something to be hopeful about.
Now, I know that any new treatment comes with the risk of potential side effects. Did they uncover any, major red flags when they added this pembrolizumab?
Thankfully, no. They found that adding it didn't significantly increase those typical side effects that we see with chemo.
Okay.
Things like neutropenia and anemia. Basically, low counts of certain blood cells.
Yeah.
Those happened in both groups. They were generally manageable.
So the usual chemo side effects weren't any worse, but what about the immunotherapy drug itself? Anything unexpected there?
Or there was a slightly higher rate of what we call immune-related adverse events
Yeah.
in the group that got pembrolizumab.
Okay.
And these are side effects that happen because the immune system is sort of being, revved up in a new way.
Like what kinds of side effects are we talking about here?
So some patients experienced reactions during the infusion, things like fever, chills, nausea. Others had skin reactions, rashes, or itching. But it's important to note that these were generally manageable.
Okay.
With the right care, they resolved. And they were all consistent with what we already know about pembrolizumab from previous research.
Okay, so It seems like the potential benefits of adding this pembrolizumab could outweigh the risks for a lot of patients, especially with those impressive PCR rates and the promising event-free survival trends. This feels like kind of a big moment for triple-negative breast cancer treatment, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this study is a huge leap forward in our understanding of how immunotherapy can be used to fight this aggressive disease. It's offering new hope for patients who previously had very limited options.
This has been super informative, but before we go any further, let's take a quick pause. We'll be right back to delve even deeper into the implications of all this. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about those really encouraging results from the KEYNOTE-522 trial. The one that showed that adding pembrolizumab to that standard chemo treatment really improved the pathological complete response rates in patients with early-stage triple-negative breast cancer.
Right, and we even touched on that promising early data on event-free survival, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper into what that actually means for patients.
Yeah, for sure. Event-free survival, it takes into account a few important outcomes. So, whether the cancer progresses to a point where surgery is no longer a good option, if it comes back in the same area, or if it spreads to other parts of the body. And then sadly, whether the patient passes away from any cause.
So it's not just about getting rid of that initial tumor. It's about making sure that the cancer doesn't, rear its ugly head again later on down the road.
Exactly. And while the researchers say, they need more follow-up to really draw firm conclusions about the long-term impact of this pembrolizumab thing, the fact that we're seeing this positive trend in event-free survival this early on is really remarkable.
It definitely gives a lot of hope to patients and their families. Did the study mention what specific types of events were most common among the patients who did experience them?
Yeah, according to the study, the most frequent event was something called distant recurrence. So that means the cancer reappeared in a spot far away from the original site.
So basically, it spread to other organs or parts of the body. That's definitely something that researchers are going to want to, keep a close eye on as they continue to follow these patients.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding those patterns of recurrence and figuring out how to prevent it, that's a huge area for future research.
Speaking of future research, did the authors of the study mention any specific directions that they plan to take this line of inquiry?
Yeah, they highlighted a few key areas. First, they emphasized the need for, longer follow-up to get a clearer picture of those long-term survival benefits of adding pembrolizumab to the chemo regimen.
That makes sense. I mean, we need to see how these patients, 5, 10, 15 years down the road to really grasp the lasting impact of this treatment.
Exactly. Another area they were interested in was exploring potential biomarkers that could predict which patients are most likely to benefit from this combination therapy.
So personalized medicine, finding those, genetic or molecular clues that can tell us, okay, this person adding pembrolizumab, that's going to be a game changer, but for this other person, maybe not so much.
Precisely. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of cancer treatment, right? Tailoring therapies to each individual's tumor biology. And then finally, the researchers mentioned investigating the ideal duration of pembrolizumab treatment. Right now, the study protocol has a set time frame. But, maybe some patients would benefit from a longer treatment period while others might not need it for as long.
So finding that sweet spot between maximizing effectiveness and minimizing the potential side effects. We talked about safety earlier, but I think it's worth circling back to that since it's such a crucial consideration, especially when we're talking about immunotherapy, which can sometimes have, unpredictable effects.
Yeah, you're right. And it's important to remember that the safety data we've been discussing is based on that initial follow-up period, which is pretty short. So it's really important to keep an eye out for any long-term side effects that could pop up.
Right, because some side effects might not show up for, months or even years after the treatment is finished.
Exactly. Patients need to be aware of that. And, they should definitely talk to their doctors about it. It's all about weighing those potential benefits against the potential risks and making those informed decisions together.
We've been focusing a lot on this KEYNOTE-522 trial, but I'm curious about how these findings fit into the bigger picture of triple-negative breast cancer treatment. Have there been any other immunotherapy drugs that have shown promise?
There's definitely a lot of excitement and ongoing research surrounding immunotherapy for this type of breast cancer. Another study called Impassion 130 that looked at a different immunotherapy drug called atezolizumab, also known as Tecentriq, in combination with chemo. It showed some positive results for certain patients, but the benefits were mostly in those whose tumors expressed high levels of PD-L1.
So unlike KEYNOTE-522, where the benefits were seen kind of across the board, IMpassion 130's results were more limited to a specific group.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. And it just highlights the need for more research to really understand how these different immunotherapy drugs work, when combined with chemo, and which patients are most likely to benefit from each specific regimen.
It's like we're putting together this giant puzzle, and each study brings us closer to seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. The more we learn, the better we can tailor our treatment approaches and offer more hope to patients facing this really tough disease.
It's amazing to see all this progress being made in cancer research. We have more to cover in this deep dive, so let's shift gears a bit. And in the final part, we'll delve into some of the key takeaways from this study and explore what it all means for the future of breast cancer treatment. Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into this KEYNOTE-522 trial. Been a lot of info, so let's take a minute to recap. What are the big takeaways here?
Well, the biggest one is that adding this pembrolizumab to the standard chemo, it really increases the chances of getting a complete response. Remember, we saw that jump from like 51% to almost 65%, and that's a huge deal in cancer treatment.
Yeah. And a complete response, meaning no signs of invasive cancer in the breast or lymph nodes. That's the goal, right?
Exactly. And even though it's early, the data on event-free survival is looking really promising. It suggests that this combination could be a real game changer when it comes to stopping the cancer from coming back or spreading.
It sounds like researchers are really onto something here. How about the safety concerns? We talked about some of the side effects.
Yeah, well, the good news is that adding the pembrolizumab, it didn't seem to make those common chemo side effects any worse. There were some immune-related side effects, but for the most part, they were manageable, and they were really similar to what we've already seen with the drug.
That's good to hear. So, looking ahead, what do you think this means for the future of treating breast cancer? Does this change things in a big way?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that immunotherapy is becoming a really important part of cancer treatment. We're seeing more and more studies showing how much potential it has, and this is likely just the start.
It feels like we're moving away from just chemo and surgery and into this new era where we can use the body's own immune system to fight cancer.
Yeah, exactly. And as we learn more about how to personalize these immunotherapy treatments, we'll be able to really fine-tune treatment plans, based on a person's specific tumor and their genetic makeup.
Wow, so like being able to predict which treatments will work best for each person.
That's the goal.
That's pretty amazing. But even with all this progress, what questions are still out there? What are researchers focused on next?
One big question is, how long should these immunotherapy treatments last? Is there a perfect amount of time that gives you the most benefit with the fewest side effects? Or does it depend on the person?
I see. And what about knowing ahead of time who's going to benefit the most from immunotherapy? Is there a way to figure that out early on?
That's another big one. Researchers are working hard to find those clues, those biomarkers that can help us make those decisions. Think about it. If we could know who would benefit most from a certain treatment and who wouldn't, it would change everything.
Yeah, it would let us make sure that everyone gets the best possible care. Any other big areas of research coming up?
Oh, for sure. There's always a search for new and better immunotherapy drugs and combinations. This is a field that's always changing, and I'm sure we'll see even more exciting discoveries in the future.
So the bottom line for our listeners is that the future of breast cancer treatment, it's looking pretty bright. There are still challenges, but research like this KEYNOTE-522 trial, it gives us a lot to be hopeful for.
I agree. And remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, ask questions, and advocate for your own health.
That wraps up our deep dive into this groundbreaking research. We covered a lot today, and I hope you all have a better understanding of the incredible advancements happening in breast cancer treatment. If you want to learn even more, check out the full research article. It's from the New England Journal of Medicine. The citation is KEYNOTE-522 NDJ-MOA 19111-549.pdf. And as always, keep learning, keep asking questions, and never lose that curiosity. Thanks for joining us.